Alex Bowman will be out 3 to 4 weeks due to fractured vertebrae. Carl Edwards gives an update on his life and plans to visit the Trackhouse shop. And Tony Stewart gives an update on his involvement at Stuber Haas Racing. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead by start talking about some throwback paint schemes, as over the last couple of days, there have been a couple throwback paint schemes that have been officially revealed. The first throwback we're looking at is William Byron's 50th anniversary Jeff Gordon throwback that we're going to see at a Darlington throwback race. Honestly, this paint scheme's okay in my opinion. I think the number being center would actually look a little better for this car. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look fantastic. I do wish it was a little bit better. The next throwback we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clements' Jeff Bodine throwback from the 1980s. Honestly, this one looks really good, pretty accurate, pretty simplistic, but I think that Jeremy Clements Racing did a really good job on this paint scheme overall. The next throwback we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' original STP throwback that we're going to end up seeing at North Wilkesboro. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, love simplicity, love it, did a fantastic job on it, and I'm excited to see it out on the racetrack at North Wilkesboro. And the final throwback we're looking at is Daniel Suarez's Ricky Rudd throwback when Ricky Rudd drove the number 26 car for Kenny Burstein with the Quaker State colors. This looks great, really awesome. Trackhouse did a fantastic job, and nonetheless, I'm definitely looking forward to see this one out on the racetrack because I think this one looks very awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Classic Collision. As it was announced last night that Classic Collision is going to sponsor Ryan Ellis for multiple races in 2023, starting at Atlanta Motor Speedway in July. Really great to see a new sponsor sponsoring Ryan Ellis. Seems like Ryan Ellis is a magnet for picking up sponsorship. Really great to see that he has a new sponsor and sponsor for multiple races, and I think it's really good to see a new sponsor come in NASCAR. As I believe this is the first time that Classic Collision is going to be sponsoring in NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Noggin Boss. As it was announced this morning that Noggin Boss has become a new licensee of Team Hendrick and started selling an HMS collection of cartoonishly large hats for under $25 a piece. We've seen this a couple times this year when Hendrick Motorsports has went on to win some races this year. I think Kyle Larson wore a large hat, and we also saw William Byron wear a couple large hats as well. We started seeing this with Carson Ozabar and Noah Gragson earlier in the year, and now we're seeing this with Hendrick Motorsports. So it's very interesting for sure. Kind of interesting they decided to do this, but great to see a new entitlement group coming in to sponsor NASCAR. Really exciting stuff overall. I'm glad to see that they are joining the sport. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kevin Smith. As it was announced yesterday that Kevin Smith is going to give the command at Dover later this year, actually this upcoming weekend. Now, will it happen this Sunday or Monday? That'll be time to tell due to the weather, but really good to see Kevin Smith coming in to give the command. I think he'll do a really solid, and I think he'll do a really good job, and nonetheless, glad to see he'll be giving the command because I think he's going to do a pretty epic job overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Daily Downforce and Out of the Groove. As this is a big announcement for the YouTube and the NASCAR YouTube scene, as it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that Daily Downforce and Out of the Groove are going to sponsor BJ McLeod at Darlington with the Out of the Groove Party Podcast bus. This is absolutely incredible for the YouTube scene and amazing to see that all these guys are going to be on the Cup car at Darlington because I would not be doing YouTube right now and be having a YouTube channel if it wasn't for these guys. So I really owe it to them to give them a lot of thanks and to see what these guys have done over last year to the YouTube community, everyone here, not just the guys from the NASCAR Weekly podcast, but from the Garage guys and also from the Zine Fall podcast. I think it's just absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible, and this is just really huge for the YouTube community. And congratulations to all the people involved. This is huge for the sport and amazing to see that they are going to be part of a NASCAR Cup car. I think it's just absolutely incredible. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Dover purse money for this weekend. Now, every single time we have a NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, or Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money. And according to him, the Cup race will have $7,629,649. And for the Xfinity Series, it's $1,361,382. That's a pretty good purse money for this weekend. Of course, with the Cup Series, that includes all the charter money. There's no unchartered teams for this weekend, but that's some pretty good purse money for this weekend going into Dover. I'm really looking forward to Dover this weekend and really happy to see that Dover's got some pretty good purse money for this weekend. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about North Wilkesboro. As it was announced yesterday morning that Mike Skinner, Ron Hornaday Jr., and Jeff Hammond have been named 2023 Tyson 250 dignitaries. Mike Skinner is going to be, I believe, maybe the honorary pace car driver, the honorary starter. Ron Hornaday Jr. is going to give the command, and Jeff Hammond will be the pace car driver. Of course, all three have pretty big significance in the truck series. Ron Hornaday Jr., Mike Skinner especially, who have won the more championships than anybody else, maybe outside of Matt Crafton. But they both were legends of the truck series, some of the greatest. And Jeff Hammond was, I believe, a team owner in the sport as well with Tom DeLoe with Red Horse Racing. This is really, really exciting to see. I'm glad to see all these people will be doing some big things for North Wilkesboro. Really exciting stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Dale Jr. Now, NASCAR has been doing their 75 greatest NASCAR drivers ever, and on their list, they're not doing it in chronological order. They're just going in random order. And they have announced that Dale Jr. has been added to the top 75 greatest drivers list. Now, they officially confirmed Jeff Burton last week, but we're mainly going to focus on Dale Jr. Dale Jr. 100% absolutely deserves to be one of the greatest ever. Dale Jr., one of the greatest ever, in my opinion. 26 NASCAR Cup Series victories, 2 Xfinity Series titles, 2-time Daytona 500 winner. And Dale Jr. not only accomplished a lot out on the racetrack, but he accomplished a lot outside of the sport, being a team owner. And I think this is a no-brainer for me. He's in the top 35 greatest race car driver, NASCAR Cup Series drivers of all time, and he absolutely deserves to be on this list. He did an amazing job in his career. He didn't live up to his dad, but it was going to be very tough to live up to his dad, and nonetheless, amazing to see that he's one of the greatest 75 drivers, because I think he absolutely deserves it. Congratulations to him on making the top 75 greatest drivers, because he absolutely has earned the right to be on that list, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the GoPro Motorplex. Well, there has been a name change, according to Seth Eckert on their Facebook page, that the GoPro Motorplex has now been renamed to Trackhouse Motorplex. Now, something interesting about Trackhouse Racing, they actually were sponsored by GoPro at Marshall, and I wonder if GoPro has become a pretty big entitlement group with the Trackhouse Racing group. So that might be a huge reason why they're changing the Motorplex, which is a go-karting Motorplex. So it's very interesting to see that they have made these changes here. This is pretty big to see and amazing to see that they've made some name changes. Trackhouse Racing, of course, making really, really big impact, not just inside the racing world, but outside of the racing world. It's amazing to see that they're doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about SiriusXM. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that according to Adam Stern, SiriusXM is renewing its deal with NASCAR for multiple years, including airing every National Series race and daily talk shows on SiriusXM. I believe NASCAR's had a long-term deal with SiriusXM for almost 20 years now, and they continue that in a much longer deal. SiriusXM has a lot of great shows, and I think it's really incredible to see that NASCAR continues to work with SiriusXM. And I'm really excited to see they're continuing to work. SiriusXM, the biggest radio company in the world. Just amazing to see. You can get it anywhere, and I guess it costs money, but you can get anywhere in the world. And I think it's just incredible to see that SiriusXM is going to continue their work. It's fascinating, it's incredible, and it's awesome to see that SiriusXM and NASCAR continue their partnership. It's going to be a long-term deal, and I think this is absolutely huge for the sport to see that they are going to continue their partnership long-term. This is really, really huge for the sport, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Roger Penske. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday, that it was reported by him on Wednesday or yesterday, that we're talking about Roger Penske's succession plan. It was reported by him that at 86, and with no plans to retire, Roger Penske only recently laid out a succession plan with his two older sons, Greg and Roger Jr., positioned to take the lead. Now, Roger Penske, even though he's much older, he's still a wise individual, and at 86, he is still doing a fantastic job as an owner. But we don't really know how much longer Roger Penske is going to be around as a team owner. And that's going to be a big question, because Greg and Roger Jr. are definitely working toward taking over the company, and both of them, I think, are managing part of the Penske operations as well in both areas. Whether it's the racing operations or the trucking company, they're still managing a lot of those operations. And I think it's still amazing to see that Roger Penske is still running his company the way he does. It's still fantastic. He does an amazing job with it. And overall, it's great to see that Roger Penske is continuing to run his operation like really really good, and he knows how to still do things, even at a very old age of 86. He does a fantastic job, and I cannot wait for the long-term future. Again, it won't be too long before Greg and Roger Jr. take over, but maybe Roger's still going to be doing this for 10 or 15 years, because if he does for another 5 or 6 years, that's going to be absolutely incredible, and I hope he continues doing it another 5 or 6 years down the road, because he's still committed to it, and he still loves doing what he does, and nonetheless, amazing to see that Roger Penske is continuing to work toward that. It's really exciting stuff overall, to be honest. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Franz Tost. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that Franz Tost will step down as team principal of AlphaTauri at the end of the 2023 season. Laurent Marquez, who's currently working at Ferrari, will take over as a team principal of AlphaTauri in 2024. Now, Franz Tost has been the team principal of AlphaTauri, I believe, for the last 4 or 5 years or a little bit longer. He's been there for quite some time. And people are going to say, well, why is he stepping down? Well, Franz Tost is a little bit older, and he's probably going to end up retiring probably from Formula 1 in a pretty big way. But this shocked a lot of people, including myself, because I thought Franz Tost was going to be around at least for a few more years. Nonetheless, though, he deserves retirement. He's done a pretty good job as a team principal. He got a win with Pierre Gasly only 3 years ago, and the team has shown some pretty big success in the last couple of years as well. So glad to see he's going to be able to retire at the end of this year. And I think Laurent Marquez is going to come in there and do a really good job with the company. But nonetheless, really exciting stuff for sure. And, well, it's disappointing here he's retiring, but I hope he can go out on a bang and can maybe get this team another victory. Hopefully they can do a really good job. And nonetheless, it's not really exciting to hear, but really excited for Laurent Marquez. But congratulations to Franz Tost on an incredible career as a team principal in Formula 1. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Milwaukee Mile. Now, the Milwaukee Mile is returning to the Truck Series for the first time since 2009. And there's a lot of talk and questions behind the scenes about the future of the Milwaukee Mile with IndyCar. Well, Adam Stern reported this on Wednesday afternoon, saying that Track Enterprise Bob Sargent on IndyCar Milwaukee Mile talks. Everyone's just in curious mode right now. Even the NASCAR level, we have a couple more levels to look at there. Anything's possible. The right things have to fall in place. IndyCar fans really want more oval racetracks, and a lot of people believe that the Milwaukee Mile is going to return to the IndyCar schedule in 2004, which would be the first time that the Milwaukee Mile has been on the IndyCar schedule since the 2015 season, and that was, of course, won by Sebastian Bourdais. Milwaukee Mile is one of the OG tracks of the IndyCar scene back in the day, and I really would love to see the Milwaukee Mile make its return to IndyCar. I think the racing would be absolutely incredible. It would absolutely be fun, and I think you would see some fantastic racing overall at this track, because I think the oval package IndyCar has been really, really good. And I think it would be fun to have it. I hope it ends up happening where we get to see IndyCar go back to the Milwaukee Mile. Like I said, I think the racing would not only be fantastic, but I think it would be absolutely incredible. And I really do hope that there's a chance and a possibility that we do see the Milwaukee Mile make an official return, because I think it'd be great for the sport. And I do hope there's a chance that that ends up happening in the 2024 season. Hope it ends up happening. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Isabella Robosto. As it was announced on Wednesday that Isabella Robosto, she has suffered a concussion in a Cars PML race at Hickory Speedway a couple days ago, and she'll be sidelined at least for the next 2 weeks. Isabella Robosto is an upcoming talent who has a lot of talent, has shown a lot of great stuff in the late model scene. And it's a shame to hear this news, what has happened, especially at a young age, because concussions can affect your life in a really, really big way. So I really hope that she can return to the racetrack really, really soon, but I hope she can take the necessary steps to recover from her injuries and get back to the racetrack really, really soon, because I think she's got a lot of potential to be a great driver in this sport, in the world of NASCAR, and I really hope that she can return to the racetrack as soon as possible. So hopefully she get back to the track really, really soon, but I'm wishing her a speedy recovery, and hopefully she can recover really, really soon to be back at the racetrack, because I think she's got a lot of talent, she's got a lot of potential, and I think she'll do really good things in this sport when she is able to return in the future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Spire Motorsports. As it was announced last night that Spire Motorsports has decided to withdraw from this weekend's Xfinity Series race at Dover, and their debut in the NASCAR Xfinity Series is going to be pushed back to a couple weeks later at Darlington. Now, why Aspire Motorsports moved their debut a couple weekends later? Well, one big reason and one reason only. Later today, the weather is expected to not be really good, and they do not have any owner's points currently at the moment to make it into the race. So they would have to rely on owner's points, and unfortunately, like I just said, they don't have any owner's points to get in. Now, of course, they're going to have backship and partnership with Junior Motorsports, but even with that equipment, they still need the owner's points to make it in. And I think it's a lot smarter to do this because they're going to have Carson Osbar in that car, and I think this is a very smart integrated strategy move by Aspire Motorsports to wait a few weeks to go ahead and get out to the racetracks. So, nonetheless, it's disappointing here they're not going to debut, but I think they were very smart at the same time for not going this week, and especially with the fact that the weather is not looking too good for this weekend. Overall, though, great decision for them. At this point, they're not going to get to race, but nonetheless, it's a good decision for them to hold off till Darlington. I hope the weather in a couple weeks can be better, so this team can run quite a few races. Carson Osbar is supposed to run around 4 to 5 races with the Spire Group, and nonetheless, it's unfortunate to see they're doing this, but I think it's very smart for them to hold off on their debut, especially with how the weather is looking currently at the moment for that weekend. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Tony Stewart. Now, we have a couple Tony Stewart stories we're going to talk about today on the channel. But the first one revolves around driver injuries. Now, we already talked about this a little bit on the channel with the Alex Bowman stuff. We're going to talk a lot more about the Alex Bowman injury. But Tony Stewart spoke on injuries in the sport and talking about drivers living because so many people talk about the fact that drivers should not be able to go out and live their lives. Tony Stewart completely disagrees with some of the people that have said drivers should not be able to go and live their lives and go race and do what they want to do. Tony Stewart says to let the drivers live because there's only one life that you get, and he's learned that some drivers can do better when they have a little more experience in the world of racing. I 100% agree with Tony Stewart on this. I think drivers should be allowed to live and do what they want. We know that some teams have some sort of contract obligations. Joe Gibbs Racing doesn't let any of their drivers do any sort of sprint car racing or a lot of extracurricular activities. And other teams, I think, have some sort of bandwagons as well, or things where they're not allowed to go do what they want to do in some areas. But I agree with Tony Stewart 100%. I think the drivers should 100% be allowed to live and do what they need to do. So that I think you get the best out of the drivers. I think the drivers perform at their best when they're allowed to do what they want to do. And I think you'll see the best drivers at the best when they're allowed to go and able to have fun. So nonetheless, I'd agree with Tony Stewart 100%. Drivers should 100% be allowed to live and do what they want to do, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Toni Breidinger. As it was announced on Wednesday early afternoon that Toni Breidinger is going to drive the one for Tricon Garage in the Truck Series, making her Truck Series debut at Kansas next weekend with Victoria's Secret sponsorship. Toni Breidinger has been in the ARCA Series for the last few years. She has driven for Venturini Motorsports, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, she has not done a very good job with Venturini Motorsports and has struggled, which is a shame because she has done an extremely good job in the USAC Sprint Car Series, winning quite a few races in USAC. But coming over, transitioning to the world of stock car racing, she has struggled. Now, she's going to be in a very good truck and going to be in a truck team that is contended for wins so far this year. Corey Heim has gotten a win so far this year, and John Hunter almost won at Las Vegas earlier this year as well. So what are my expectations for her? I'm not expecting her to win. I think she'll be somewhat of a contender, maybe, for maybe a top 15 or top 20. But I'm not expecting much from her. Like I said, she's kind of struggled, and I don't think she's going to have a fantastic run. And I'm sorry, because the only reason she's really in that truck is because she's got that Toyota development stuff, and also the fact that she's got Victoria's Secret sponsorship, because that's really cool that Victoria's Secret is coming in and sponsoring her that next weekend at Kansas. But I'm just not really expecting much of her going into next weekend. I think she's going to struggle a little bit, and I don't think she's going to have a great run. I think the best she'll get is a top 20, which would not be bad for her in her debut, but she's going to be in a championship caliber truck. Even though Tricon Garage is not as good as what KBM was, I still think Tricon Garage could win a championship this year with a couple of their drivers, including Corey Heim, who scored a victory earlier this year at Martinsville. I think she'll do okay, but not fantastic. Hopefully she can prove me wrong, and she can do really good with the equipment that she has. Nonetheless, so it's a good opportunity for her, and it's really great to see a new sponsor coming in. I'm just not expecting her to perform at a great level this next weekend at Kansas. Not expecting much of her, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Oz Kaninsky from Sports had put out an article around Kyle Busch, and it was about Kyle Busch speaking on his good start at Rich Choice Racing, as Kyle Busch spoke to the media in regards to his great start at RCR, basically saying the more wins you can get, the better for the team. Kyle Busch has had a pretty good start to the 2023 season. He has scored 2 wins so far in 2023, coming at Auto Club, and last weekend at Talladega, he's had 3 top 5s and 5 top 10s, and led about 55 or 56 laps so far in the season. But Kyle Busch has definitely been a lot stronger this year. In some of those races where he's not finished as well, he probably should have finished good. Bristol Dirt had some sort of issue on the car, like some suspension failure or something broke on the car, and basically had a top 5 car, a car that could have won the race, but kind of got stuck in traffic and got put in a really tough position, was a contender for a lot of that race. Then you go to other races like Martinsville, where he probably could have ran a little better, but he kind of struggled there. But he hasn't been great in Martinsville the last couple times we've been there. But I think Kyle Busch this year is absolutely a championship threat, and I think the old Kyle Busch is definitely back. I would like to see some more top 5s and some top 10s for sure, because he only got half the top 10s, but let's be fair, there's not a lot of drivers that have 5 or 6 top 10s so far this season. Yeah, so he's definitely doing better on that front, and currently sits 5th in the points. I think Kyle Busch can get a couple more wins in the 2023 season. I think he's definitely going to be a championship contender by the end of the year, and I think he's got a really good shot of making the championship 4 in the 2023 season, which would be the first time he would make the championship 4 since 2019 season. And the last time he made the championship 4, he won the championship. So I think Kyle Busch definitely has a shot to do that. I think he's going to be a championship contender, continue to be a championship threat, and nonetheless, I think he's got a really, really awesome and a great shot to win the championship in the 2023 season. I think he's going to be a contender. I think he's going to be a threat, and I think he's got a really good shot to get the championship in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. Now, Richard Childress Racing was handed some pretty big penalties for Austin Dillon, and they basically got a 60-point penalty that they ended up receiving. Well, no surprise, Richard Childress Racing is going to appeal those penalties. And the appeal, according to Bob Pockers, is going to be happening this upcoming Tuesday to appeal that 60-point penalty. Now, obviously, Richard Childress Racing, with the new appeals rules and how things have changed, they will not be able to receive all their points back unless they throw the appeal completely out and they decide to give everything back to the team. But if they basically cannot get all their points back, they can only go down, I believe, the 24 or 20, I believe the 20 to 6 range. So they can go as low as 20 points, and they still could be as high as 60 points, which 60 points is quite a bunch of points for the team. And I believe they also got a $25,000 or $50,000 fine. So we'll have to see what they decide to do in regards to that when it comes to the appeal board. But I don't expect them to get all their points back. And honestly, if you want my opinion, they should 100% go ahead and live stream the stream and what's going on there so people can see and be interested in what exactly is going on. Nonetheless, though, we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to how the appeal ends up going, but there's going to be appeal this upcoming Tuesday. We'll likely find out if Austin Dillon ends up winning the appeal or not. We'll have to wait and see if that appeal is going to be happening this upcoming Tuesday. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kasey Kahne. As it was announced yesterday, late afternoon, that Kasey Kahne is going to be joining the SRX later this year at Berlin Raceway. Kasey Kahne currently drives full-time in the World of Outlaws, currently at the moment, a 18-time winner in the NASCAR Cup Series, won the Coke 600 2 or 3 times, and also won the Brickyard 400 in 2017, his last NASCAR Cup Series victory. Kasey Kahne definitely being the SRX is going to be fun. I think he absolutely will be a contender for the win there, and joins a long list of drivers who are going to be competing in the SRX this year. Drivers like Hailie Deegan, Brad Keselowski are on a full-time basis. Tony Stewart. Kyle Busch is going to be there. Denny Hamlin is going to be in there. Kevin Harvick's going to be racing. Paul Tracy, Joseph Newgarden, Ryan Hunter-Reay. You name it. There's a Bobby Labonte's going to be there. There are a lot of drivers that are competing in the SRX this year, and Kasey Kahne, I think, definitely has a shot to get that victory at Berlin Raceway later this year. And honestly, I'm definitely 100% looking forward to see Kasey Kahne back behind the wheel. I don't know if he's going to be the favorite to win, but I certainly think it's really great nonetheless to see that Kasey Kahne is going to be back in the SRX, which the SRX, we're getting really close to start of that. That's about 2.5 months from now. They also announced a broadcast team for that race for a couple weekends ago. If actually they announced it 2 or 3 days ago, which I think the broadcast team for the SRX this year is really, really strong. You've got Alan Bessick leading the broadcast. You've got Matt Yoakum on pit row, and you also got Joey Logano Darrell Waltrip, and also Connor Daly commentating these races as well. I do believe that Joe Logano will be commentating that Berlin race, if I'm not mistaken. But nonetheless, I think that this year's SRX lineup is really something else. And they've got the strongest SRX lineup that we have probably seen since the SRX was ended up being formed. Nonetheless, though, I think it's absolutely amazing. I think it's great. And I'm looking forward to for sure see Casey Kane back in the SRX this year. I think he's going to do a very good, fantastic job, and I'm absolutely looking forward to see that we're going to see Casey Kane join the SRX for the first time, and I think he'll do a really good job in the SRX. Now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart and his involvement with Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, there's been a few questions, especially over the last year, about Tony Stewart if he's still really involved with Stewart-Haas Racing for multiple reasons. Number one, Tony Stewart said last year that he was really fed up with NASCAR, especially all the penalties that Stewart-Haas Racing had received. Kevin Hart basically being frustrated with NASCAR, among other things, and also not basically losing Eldora to going to Bristol Dirt, among other things. And a lot of people have been questioning if Tony Stewart really still loves being part of NASCAR. Well, Tony Stewart cleared up a lot of the situation. He basically said he still loves being at SHR and is still involved very heavily with Stewart-Haas Racing. Yes, he's focused on running his drag racing organization in the NHRA and basically running the NHRA on a full-time basis as well. But he says he still loves and is focused on trying to make Tony Stewart's organization, Stewart-Haas Racing, a lot better. Honestly, this is really, really good news because I've been questioning this as well, and I thought there was a really strong chance that Tony Stewart eventually was going to sell his stake in Stewart-Haas Racing because, again, especially how Tony Stewart has been frustrated with NASCAR over the last couple of years, I think that there basically was a lot of bad things and bad cloud around Tony. But I think things have been changing. Number one, Tony Stewart feels a lot bit more happier. We've seen him in the commentary booth with Fox. He doesn't seem like he's always frustrated with some decisions being made by NASCAR all the time. And overall, I think Tony Stewart has generally been a lot happier as a person. And, I think when you look at Tony Stewart, I think that if he can stay more involved, because again, I think him not being as involved probably has hurt Stewart-Haas Racing a little bit. With him still being involved with the team, though, it does give me a little bit more hope in the future of Stewart-Haas Racing, because you look at Kevin Harvick, he's going to retire at the end of the 2023 season. But you don't really have a lot going on for the long-term future. Yes, you do have guys like Chase Briscoe, who's been running on a broken hand quintessentially over the last 2 weeks. He's been doing overall a really, really good job with Stewart-Haas Racing, especially recently with an injury. And then you've got Ryan Preece, who's shown potential in the past, who I think is a very, very talented driver. Yes, he struggled throughout the year, but he's shown some glimpse of hope in the 2023 season so far. And then, of course, you have Eric Almirola, who we don't know how much longer he's going to be with Stewart-Haas Racing long term. My guess is there's a chance that he could retire by the end of the 2023 season, but he also could return to 2024. It's still 50-50. We don't really know what's going on there. Hopefully in the long-term future, and not so distant future, we do find out what's going on with Eric Almirola's long-term future. But I am happy to see that Tony is still committed to Stewart-Haas Racing, because the more Tony Stewart stays committed, the better it's going to be for the team long-term overall. And I think Tony Stewart does have a lot of potential to still bring Stewart-Haas Racing back up front, because it's been really a big struggle for the last years for Stewart-Haas Racing since that 2020 season when Kevin Harvick scored 9 victories. And while they won 3 races last year, and we saw Chase Briscoe have a pretty strong 2022 season, especially near the end, I just think Stewart-Haas Racing, there was a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of people like myself thought that Tony Stewart was going to sell his stake in Stewart-Haas Racing and just go focus on running his NHRA organization. But that doesn't just seem to be the case, and overall it makes me happy to see that Tony Stewart is still pretty committed at running Stewart-Haas Racing and making that team as good as possible. I really hope in the next year Stewart-Haas Racing can be that top tier team they used to be, especially when they were Chevy, or kind of get back to where they were in 2018 when they had a lot of money after the loss of Nature's Bakery, and they can be back to that level where they were in 2018, where they were all 4 of the drivers made it to the round of 8 and were championship contenders that season. I hope it happens long-term future. I really hope it can happen, and nonetheless, I'm really happy to see Tony Stewart is still involved with Stewart-Haas Racing, and I hope he can make the team a lot stronger going forward in the long-term future. Hopefully, that ends up happening. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, I did an initial breaking news video in regards to the Alex Bowman story that did come out on Wednesday afternoon. However, I want to go a little more in depth on the Alex Bowman story. So, as you guys already know at this point, Alex Bowman is going to miss 3 to 4 weeks due to a fractured vertebrae suffered in a high limits racing crash at 34 Raceway in Kansas. He was involved in a crash with Connor Merrill, and they both actually, according to Dylan Walsh and Vince Walsh, who were on the broadcast, they said that they were both able to walk away and were okay. After examining Alex Bowman at the hospital, though, he has been told that he will miss at least 3 to 4 weeks due to that fractured vertebrae, which we'll talk about that in a second. But who is going to substitute for Alex Bowman in those select few races? Well, Josh Berry, who substituted for Chase Elliott in 5 of the 6 races that Chase ended up missing. Josh Berry is going to be in that 48 car until Alex Bowman does make his official recovery and is able to return back to the racetrack. If the timetable does set up, though, Alex Bowman will likely be back either around the North Wilkesboro region for the All-Star race, or he will make his return at the Coke 600. If he makes his return at the Coke 600, if I was Hendrick Motorsports, I would have Josh Berry on standby. That's not going to be an easy race to go through. Now, Alex Bowman did release a statement later in the day, and he did say that he is okay and basically feels okay, and he's just going to be at home and resting, and is hoping to recover really, really soon and be back at the racetrack really, really soon. This is now the second Hendrick driver to be injured so far in the 2023 season and miss races, as we talk about Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott missed 5 or 6 races in a row due to an injury of basically snowboarding and got injured over there, and was really, really big injury that he was unfortunately affected by. Now let's talk about the situation with Alex Bowman. Can Alex Bowman still make the playoffs in 2023? Absolutely, yes. I think Alex Bowman can absolutely make the playoffs this year. He's actually in the playoffs currently at the moment, 41 points above the cutoff line. And judging by the average points he's probably going to miss, I would think Alex Bowman will be about 40 to 50 points back. The question is going to be, how is he going to perform when he does make his return? That's going to be a huge question. The other thing I do want to say, though, is I hope Alex Bowman does make a speedy and a really, really quick recovery and can get back to the racetrack ASAP and as soon as possible. Because the sooner he can get back to the racetrack, the better it's going to be for NASCAR and the fans overall, especially his race fans. The other big question I do have is, how will Josh Berry perform? Well, unlike when he got into the 9-car ran at Las Vegas, I think Josh Berry is going to have a much easier time driving this 48 car. Now, he's going to be working with a different team. Yes, it's still Hendrick Motorsports, but he's going to be driving the number 48 car, which has been pretty strong throughout this year as well, with Alex Bowman. And, of course, Blake Harris is a really, really good crew chief as well. And I think Josh Berry could be a contender, especially the fact he's going to be running the Xfinity Series race as well tomorrow. He's going to have that experience ready Friday, Sunday, or Monday when the race ends up happening. And remember, last year, this 48 team was one of the fastest cars in the race, and probably him or Kyle Busch was going to win that race at Dover last year. But I think Josh Berry will be a contender. It wouldn't surprise nor shock me if Josh Berry does end up winning a race before Alex Bowman does make a return, which would be really, really great for Josh Berry and an incredible thing. The other question a lot of people are having is, should drivers be restricted, especially in Hendrick Camp with 2 of their drivers being injured? Will Hendrick Motorsports make decisions to restrict their drivers from going out and doing extracurricular activities? No, absolutely not. 2 reasons. Number 1, to me, and this is a no-brainer, you need to let the drivers live and do what they want to do. The more experience you give these drivers, the better they're going to be, especially with the limited practice we get now in the NASCAR Cup Series. I don't think it's a good thing to have restrictions on their drivers. You want a perfect example on this? Look at Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch got restricted how much he could run the Xfinity Series, and with the practice qualifying restrictions of Joe Gibbs, and his performance completely dipped. In contrast, look at Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson's allowed to go run as many sprint car races or dirt-related model races, wherever he gets into, and he's one of the championship contenders currently at the moment, and goes and wins those races and uses that experience, and he comes back and does a really good job there. Cristobal, the other side, is kind of in the middle. Cristobal's doing pretty good, but imagine if Cristobal didn't have the restrictions and he could easily go and run other races. I think his performance in NASCAR would absolutely get better. So no, I don't expect that. The other reason, Kyle Larson will leave Hendrick Motorsports. If Kyle Larson cannot do sprint car racing or go race anything outside of this, you're not going to see that end up happening. And also, keep this in mind, when Alex Bowman crashed at that race, he had Ally sponsor him. So the sponsors are not going to be too mad because he basically was driving the Ally car in that event when he ended up wrecking. So I don't see them making any changes and don't see them making any restrictions in regards to that. Now, the thing I want to say again is wishing Alex Bowman a healthy and speedy recovery, and hope he gets back to the racetrack really, really soon. I want to see him back really, really soon. And we've seen a lot of drivers basically miss races so far this year. This is the third driver that's had an injury so far this year. The other driver, of course, being Chase Briscoe, who suffered a hand injury. He has not missed a race so far this season. I don't expect him to miss a race going forward. It's going to take some time for that hand to recover. But nonetheless, I hope Alex Bowman can recover really, really soon and be back at the racetrack ASAP, because I want to see him back at the racetrack as soon as possible. Maybe he'll be back at the racetrack there on the sidelines watching, but we'll see when Alex Bowman recovers. But I'm wishing him nonetheless a speedy recovery and a hope to get back to the racetrack really, really soon. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, I kind of talked about Carl Edwards here on the channel a couple days ago. I want to give a little more talk around Carl Edwards. Now, Carl Edwards obviously was inducted in the 75 greatest NASCAR drivers list of all time. Carl Edwards accomplished a lot in NASCAR, scored 28 NASCAR Cup Series victories, won a bunch of big races. In NASCAR, won the Coke 600, won the Southern 500 2015. And he also, like I said, was a championship contender, finishing runner-up in many years, including in 2000, almost won the championship in his rookie year. In 2008, he ended up finishing second. And in 2011, would have won the championship in the point standings with the Winston Cup era, but he ended up finishing second in a tiebreaker to Tony Stewart in 2011. And came close to winning the championship in 2016 as well, and has not raced in NASCAR since that 2016 season when he decided to retire. So he was on Sirius XM NASCAR radio very recently, and he gave an update on his life. He says, "Things are good. I'm finally growing up. I'm trying to live my life the best I can." And he also knows, "I'm going to visit the Trackhouse facility soon. I'm not taking a seat insert, just checking it out." That is very, very interesting to me. It's a little weird to me that Carl Edwards is basically going to the Trackhouse facility just to check out the Trackhouse shop. I wonder maybe if Carl Edwards is maybe looking at trying to, somehow actually find a way to come back and race in the sport, because it's been a long time since Carl Edwards has raced. And this is not the first time we've heard rumors and rumblings about maybe Carl Edwards being a potential driver. Remember, at the Daytona 500, there was a random third 2311 racing car that was coming to play that, of course, will be for Kurt Busch when he decides to make a return in the future when Kurt Busch is medically cleared. We know that he wants to come back really, really soon. But we all thought that Carl Edwards was actually coming back earlier this year before with 2311 Racing. Remember, there was a headshot that came out at the Daytona 500, and we all thought that that was actually Carl Edwards. It then turned out that it was actually Travis Pastrana. But at least it's good to see that Carl Edwards is doing really, really well. But I would love for Carl Edwards to make a one-off return in the Project 91 car. Yes, the Project 91 car is obviously basically a car that's basically meant for international racing drivers. But I think it would be really fun if Carl Edwards would come back to NASCAR. But I don't know if he is going to return. He's saying he's not going to return. But it's interesting to me that he's going to the Trackhouse facility and checking it out. It's weird to me because normally when you're going somewhere, you don't go to a shop just to do that. But if he's going out to the Trackhouse shop just to check it out, that is so really, really cool. Maybe long-term Carl Edwards comes in an ownership role in an organization. I think that would be really, really cool. Not as a driver, maybe he's in the ownership side of things. That would be really, really cool. But if Carl Edwards never does return, it doesn't sound like he's going to return, I still think it would be really, it still is amazing to see that Carl Edwards is living his life. Regardless if he ever comes back or not, I personally think he is a NASCAR Hall of Famer. He accomplished a lot in the NASCAR world, and I think he 100% absolutely deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I think a lot of us fans do miss Carl Edwards and want him to come back. We've missed him. He's basically teased fans for the last years. We got teasers as far back as 2020 and around Christmas time in 2020. I remember talking about that, where he was teasing maybe doing like a one-off, maybe in a long-term future, but he basically kind of denied it at the same time during was on Sirius XM a couple years ago. But it's so good to hear that Carl Edwards is living life really, really good, and he's been doing a lot of great things. We've seen pictures over the years of him doing a lot of great things and a lot of great accomplishments. If he never comes back, I wish Carl Edwards the best of luck in life. He's just an incredible person. He's done a lot of great things in his life and accomplished a lot. But I really would love for Carl Edwards to come back on a one-off, whether it is with Trackhouse Racing. That'd be really, really fun if he came and drove the Project 91 car, or a third car that isn't even the Project 91 car. It's just a car that's not associated with the Project 91 group, which we'll talk about them potentially here in the coming days and weeks. But maybe 2311 Racing as well, getting back in Toyota. He's probably good friends with Denny, and he still speaks to people in the industry as well. But it is really awesome nonetheless here that Carl Edwards is enjoying life really, really good right now, living his life, growing up, doing what he wants to do. And I really hope that Carl Edwards does get inducted in the Hall of Fame here in the coming months. It won't be till later this year because they're moving it with a bunch of things to the 75 greatest drivers. They're moving the voting a little bit later in the year for that. But I really love for Carl Edwards to be in next year's ballot. He's one of my favorite drivers growing up, being a Missouri native. And I miss Carl Edwards racing to this day. Nonetheless, so I'm glad that he's living his life. Or maybe, just maybe, somehow Junior Motorsports picks up Carl Edwards. Who knows? That would be really crazy. Junior Motorsports pick them up. We know Junior Motorsports, they want to go cup racing. But nonetheless, happy to see that Carl Edwards is enjoying life, and I hope he's doing really good right now. And just, it's good to hear his voice once again. And maybe he'll make a return, but I don't know if he'll return. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So, that is where we're going to be for today's NASCAR news and a motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. When do you think Alex Bowman is going to make his return? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Carl Edwards will ever come back to NASCAR or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not sure what's going to be on the channel tomorrow. It could be a silly season update. It could be a predictions video for maybe 2025. I'm not entirely sure yet. We're going to have to wait and see. Then on Sunday, there's potentially going to be a race review. I'm not entirely sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. It is all going to depend on the weather and stuff. The weather ain't looking too good for Sunday. If not, that race will get postponed to Monday, and we'll have a review then. And that'll probably shake up the channel a little bit with the schedule there. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. We're getting closer to 2,000 subscribers, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. We got a lot of great content on the way. Hope you guys tune in. There's a big announcements coming and big projects coming out soon. So I'll see you guys for that. Take care, everybody.